Thank you all for tuning in for another episode of Make It Make Sense. Before we begin, I wanted to make a statement about the recent events happening around our country. With the murders of Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, and Ahmaud Arbery, and so many others due to racial injustice, our nation has been outraged. We decided it would be best to take a break from the podcast for a couple of weeks to focus on social justice issues. In their memory, I would like to take a moment of silence in their honor. Thank you. We hope all of our viewers are staying safe during this time.
Perfect.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sam.
Hi, I'm Christi.
Hey, I'm Lexi.
And you are tuned in to Make It Make Sense. This week, we're going to be talking about loan repayments.
And for this week's Icebreaker question, we have, how did you all feel about loans when you entered college?
When I entered DePaul, I was very nervous about loans. It's always been seen as like this very, scary topic that not many people discuss. And I know like my high school especially, we didn't go over financial aid and loan repayment at all. So everything that I knew was through what I found on my own, which was very limited. So I was very worried about loan repayment when I entered DePaul.
Has anything changed for you, Sam, that has happened from when you first entered college till now on how you feel about loans? Or do you still kind of feel the same about them?
Oh, no, it's been a whole 360. Thankfully, because I work for the financial fitness team, like in the ways that we educate others, I'm also educating myself on these same topics. And I feel much more confident. Not that I know every single thing. I'm not an expert in loans, but I would definitely say I feel comfortable in approaching the subject of loans now.
For me, when I entered college, I kind of had like a consistent feelings about loans. I knew I didn't want to have them, and if I did get them, like I had a max of my loans of which I would take out. Because my mom, she was like, "Listen, I don't sign the dotted line. I'm not taking out any loans for you, so you're gonna have to figure out that yourself." So when I got into college, I just tried to do. I made sure I made the right decision in terms of like what school I went to that gave me the most scholarship money. And then when I transferred out of my previous institution, came to DePaul, and I was looking at taking out loans, um, I made sure I took like the necessary steps to have that cap on how much loans that I take out. So my feelings toward it is kind of just like neutral. Yeah, it's pretty neutral.
Yeah, I think for me, similarly, it was something that was never really talked about growing up, just something that everyone is like, everyone has loans, it's just what you have to do. So I was like, all right, that's what I'm gonna have to do. But I like didn't really know anything about the process. Really started learning freshman year when I was in the EDGE program and also had financial fitness presentations. And then similarly, my job here, and I was learning all sorts of things about it. And I was like, oh, okay, I still think it's not the best thing, it'd be nice through education without loans.
Yeah.
There are things that you can do to make it a little bit better, and I'm glad that I know that now.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. Again, this role has taught me so much. So I'm glad that it's not overwhelming, and hopefully we can continue to pass on the knowledge we're learning now to other students so they don't feel overwhelmed when they enter college like some of us may have. What are some of the different loan repayment options that are available for students that are interested in taking out loans?
So for loans, there are kind of three big categories that I like to think about. One is the standard plan, which is the standard plan, nothing changes. Your first payment is the exact same as your last payment. There is no variability at all in payment, 10-year repayment plan, and it's one of the fastest ways to pay off your loans and pay the least amount as well, with interest accruing the entire time. And then I also think about a big category of income-driven repayment plans. So that's like your pay as you earn, your repay as you earn, income contingent, income-driven, all of that sorts of stuff. and what that really means. And some is based on 10% of your income, some is 15, some is if you file jointly if you're married, some you file like single. And that all kind of plays into some things. And then just like the graduated plan, which increases every 2 years. There's an extended plan of that, and there's also an extended plan of standard plan, where you can pay off your loan in 10 years if you do the graduated plan, or do the extended and do 25 years.
What is the difference between subsidized and unsubsidized loans?
Well, subsidized and unsubsidized loans, one, the government, for the subsidized loans, the government pays on the interest while you're in school. However, with the unsubsidized loans, there's interest accruing while you're attending school. And that's the biggest thing that people don't realize when they're taking out these loans. So if I would advise anyone, it would be to take out the subsidized loans before taking out the unsubsidized loans, because the government is going to pay interest while you're in school and up to 6 months after you graduate until you're supposed to start paying those loans back.
I feel like I get that question all the time when it comes to
Mm-hmm.
loans. So thank you both. Y'all did a great job summing that up. I probably wouldn't have summed it up so nicely. So thank you. Can you explain the Parent Plus loan and how it differs from other loan options?
The Parent Plus loan is a loan taken out for parents. It's different because interest, number one, is typically higher than for the unsubsidized and subsidized loans, which just goes to students. And there is also a limited amount of repayment options for Parent Plus loans as well. So like all of those repayment plan options that I mentioned previously, those were all true for unsubsidized and subsidized loans. But for Parent Plus loans, they don't have that huge array of income-driven repayment plans. They only have one income-based repayment plan, and that's the ICR, income contingent repayment. And that's at 20%. Remember, for the unsubsidized plans, you can have income that's 10%, 15%, 20%. For the Parent Plus loan, you can only have an income-based plan that is 20% of your income minus the poverty level and divided by 12 and all sorts of stuff. So that's something that's really interesting.
Did you touch on like how students will repay those?
No, I didn't. Christy, do you want to take that one?
How students can repay those? Usually, um, if I'm being correct, students are not able to pay those student loans back. It's usually in the parent's name. Now, there is a way for student loans to be transferred into the student's name, and then it can be passed on to a student. We had one student come in, and their parent wanted to give the student their Parent Plus loan. And begin to repay those student loans back, and that student ended up having like $90,000 worth of debt. However, it can be very hard to actually transfer that student loan from the parent to the child, because ultimately that parent is responsible for that loan, and that's something to be really mindful of.
And I think an important thing to mention there too is that the only way that process can happen is through a private lender.
Yep.
The other repayment plan options that I was talking about, the ICR for Parent Plus loans, is only available to you if your Parent Plus loan stays with the federal government. Once you go to the student is trying to pay that loan off, they probably aren't going to have that option. It's probably just going to be one variation of the standard plan, however high they decide to make that, and that's what you have to go off of.
So there's so many students that come into DePaul Central asking about loan disbursements, like how can I get money to help me cover some of my expenses such as rent, groceries, car repayments, etc. So can one of you explain what loan disbursements are and how they're distributed to students as refunds, or how they could potentially be distributed as a refund?
Usually with how that way is set up, so when you have your financial aid can tell you what loans that you can qualify for that quarter or for this school year. And so how that can work is you really have to contact the financial aid office and say, hey, well, for example, say maybe you had enough scholarships to which your quarter was paid for. However, you still have access to student loans, and you decide, hey, I want to take out my student loans because I want to pay rent. So what you do is you go to the financial aid office and you ask them to reapprove, well, open up your application for you to get your financial aid, or for you to get your student loans. They open that up for you, and then you can accept or decline those student loans, and then it can be dispersed to you via check or via direct deposit. And it's better to have direct deposit because you don't want $3,000 something dollar check in the mail that you plan to use for rent.
And something I want to add, a cute little insider tip that I learned from Michael, who also works in DePaul Central, is that loans are typically dispersed on a Wednesday night, the Wednesday night before classes. So if you're like, when exactly I want a day or something, it's like, all right, Wednesday, typically the week before quarter starts, is when all of that money's going to get dispersed.
Do you all have any tips for students that may be getting their money refunded back to them?
Well, my biggest tip would be to make sure that the money that's being refunded back to you is from scholarships and not from student loans, because some students aren't aware that they get this refund check and they're like, oh, this refund check is for, I had access money, but oftentimes that access money comes from student loans that weren't used. And so students gets to graduation and they look at their student loan balance and they're wondering how they have a balance and they didn't have no idea where this balance come from, but that's because they took that refund check and they used it for something else, not knowing it came from student loan and not from scholarships.
Yeah, I'd also say I've heard of a few stories of people who get their refund check and, that only lasts for like 3 months, and they actually just pay all of 3 months rent right away. So they have no fears at all that they're going to spend it right when they get it. It's gone. That's what they were supposed to use it for, and that's what they wanted to use it for. And like landlords typically want their money. No one's really going to object to getting a few $1,000 a little earlier. So that's a nice way for students to stay under control that way.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that another important thing is students need to understand what exactly their financial aid package is. Calculate how much your expenses are going to be for the quarter with tuition and like other necessary items such as like the UPass or books. And if you still have a remaining balance of scholarships, of course, or grants, of course, have that refunded to you. But if it's loan money, like Christy said, you don't have to accept that. And I had a few quarters where I adjusted my financial aid package to not include loans because I didn't need that money. So even though it would have been nice to have a couple $1,000s being dispersed to me for spending money, that money has to eventually be repaid back. So if you don't need to repay it, or if you don't need to necessarily have that money, try to think wisely about choosing to have that money dispersed to you. How has the COVID-19 pandemic been impacting loan repayments?
So I know for sure all interest and all payments are paused until September 30th. So if you were planning on making payments, if you're already in repayment, if you are going to enter in repayment, you won't have to do any sort of thing like that until September 30th, which is nice. Of course, the government's never going to object to you having spending now. So if you feel like you still want to make payments, that's fine. Like, who cares? But if you can't do it, don't want to do it, just want to take a break until September 30th.
But yet, always remember to contact your loan service provider to get a clarification on when you should be making those repayments.
Yes, and I'll also say, this is kind of a slight tangent from the question, but interest rates for students who are still in school next year are low. They are like been in a long because the economy's trash. It's gone. No longer around. So interest rates are super low. It's like 2% or something like that, which is, it'd be nice again if it was 0, but a lot in the past. And even the Grad Plus loans for students who are looking at graduate school, those interest rates are also like the lowest they've been in a long time. So that's not a perk, but nice to see.
Right.
So what is loan consolidation?
So loan consolidation is when you have multiple loans. A lot of students take out multiple loans throughout their time at DePaul, like a loan for freshman year, sophomore year, etc. And a private company, you can also go through a federal company as well, takes all of those multiple loans and wraps it into one large loan. So if you have multiple loan servicers or something like that, and you're really annoyed with making all sorts of different payments at the same time of the month, and you're like, this is stupid, I just want one loan, you can consolidate them all together, and it's just one payment, one loan.
Yeah. But you also got to be careful with the consolidations, because some consolidation plans will disqualify you from some government assistance programs like public loan forgiveness and teacher loan forgiveness. So you want to make sure before you consolidate, like, that is something that you are aware of.
And our last question is, what are some other loan repayment tips that you have?
Oh, I have a good one. if you're able, set up automatic repayments, and you can actually save 0.25% on your interest rate for all of your loans.
Yes. And my tip would be, if you are not making a lot of money with your job or don't plan to be making a lot of money, it may be in your best interest to do an income driven repayment, and because that will allow for you to not feel like overloaded with having like a standard repayment plan, because you'll be making more payments with a standard repayment plan. So I would say do the income driven repayment plan if you have a low income, and then if you want to make extra payments, you can make extra payments on your student loans without being penalized. And also another tip is that when you set a repayment plan, you're not locked into it. You can change it anytime. So that's something to make sure you are aware of.
My tip would be, if you do choose to have your loans dispersed to you in a refund, like you have excess money, to use it wisely. As I mentioned earlier, some students, they decide to live a bit above their means. They want to go on spring break in Cancun and live up their best life and have like this lavish apartment that they may not necessarily be able to afford if it wasn't for that loan. So again, try to live modestly if you do take out that loan, and be considerate of how you will have to eventually pay that loan back. Some people, their careers like might guarantee them that they can pay those monthly payments without a problem, but that's not the case for everybody. So please be mindful of that before you take out a loan.
Yeah, also one more thing, like please don't wait to the last minute to understand how many loans you actually have. I had a friend who went through the entire 4 years and did not know how much debt she had. And she was like, oh, I'll just worry about that later. Don't do that. Don't do that. Please don't do that. And then also make sure like you know your loan service provider and like looking at your account to make sure everything is good, because I had a time where my loan service provider, I had made a payment like $1,600 and it was not reflected on my account. And I'm like, somebody has to fix this. So make sure you stay really like on top of your stuff, because they may do their job, but it's always best to double check. Thank you all for tuning into our 6th episode. Next week, we'll be talking about the minimalistic approach to budgeting. And make sure you follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at DePaul Central.
Perfect.